Welcome back to The Great and Secret Knowledge, a speculative fiction podcast. I'm one of your fine hosts, Jeff Richardson, and who's with me today? It's Sofia.
Hello. How's it going?
Oh, it's super. I'm so excited. It's the last 2 chapters of the Vor Game. Such highs and fun separate endings. What are your impressions of these 2 chapters?
I really like them. I think it's also fun in that the chapter 16 is, how would you say it? Like, it's very extreme, I suppose. And then 17 is much more like almost like a afterword, or an epilogue or something. So I like that. It's nice to have a little bit more, to kind of get an after picture.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Oh, I always love a relaxed button, unless you're setting up like a big cliffhanger. But for a book like this that stands alone, I think a nice round ending works really well.
Yeah. And some of the other stories have been much more abrupt in their ending. It's not always that we get this kind of final time, like calm down to the action.
Yeah. Well, ordinarily we'd banter a bit about the past couple of weeks or month, but we got 2 big chapters. Let's get right into it. Let's go. Okay. So Cavillo and Gregor arrive on the Ariel. I think it's the Ariel, Miles' ship. We get a brief description of the space armor and its capabilities. Cavillo arrives and she's like, all right, what's the trick? And Miles blows away the flex tube, sending their shuttle spinning off into space. We see Elena massing a giant plasma cannon, or manning, rather. Personing? Anyway. So Miles is thinking about how it's still pretty dicey. He needs to work at this so that no one dies. Full broadcast on all channels plus loudspeaker. It was absolutely essential to Miles's plan that he get in the first word. Cavillo, he shouted. Deactivate your weapons and freeze, or I'll blow Gregor to atoms. Body language was a wonderful thing. It was amazing how much expression could come through the blank, shining surface of space armor. The littlest armored figure stood open-handed, stunned, bereft of words, bereft for precious seconds of reactions. Because, of course, Miles had just stolen her opening line. Now what do you have to say for yourself, love? It was a desperate ploy. Miles had judged the hostage problem logically insoluble. Therefore, clearly the only thing to do was make it Cavillo's problem instead of his own.
Yeah, is that some kind of prisoner's dilemma? Is there a word for this where both have like a hostage and they have to decide whose hostage it is?
It's probably got a different name in military strategy or whatever.
Yeah.
I've heard it called, in some cases, a Mexican standoff. It might have a different name in Sweden.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. That's the one where like each have their weapon pointed at each other, right?
Yeah, the platonic ideal is in Reservoir Dogs, where every single character has their guns pointed at someone else. But yeah, it's sense. I mean, there are other hostage movies and things that are probably a closer match.
Mm. Yeah, but it's a fun kind of like dilemma thing where it's like you you both, I don't know, it's something like Miles has to pretend that he doesn't actually want this hostage, but still he cannot be too aggressive about it. It's kind of a fun dilemma.
Yeah, I love that trope of like pretending that the hostage isn't that valuable. I can't think of any other examples right now, but I do enjoy it. Although, if you did that in real life, the problem with threats and suggestions are that sometimes they're taken literally.
Yeah.
Someone calls your bluff.
Yeah, but for Cavillo, it's like if she would kill Gregor, then she doesn't have any. So she's like, she's coming onto this ship with the assumption that really, as long as she has Gregor, she's safe. But then when Miles makes her doubt herself, then she doesn't really have anything to do. Because what is she going to do? She cannot kill him, then she doesn't have anything left.
If she was smart, she would have met Naismith on a neutral vessel, like away from both ships, where if something goes wrong, they both die. Whereas she was cocky and came to his ship in person. So
yeah, I agree. I think she stretched herself a little bit too thin when she kind of betrayed everyone and just went off on her own. Otherwise, she would have still had all of this army and everything.
Oh, yeah. That reminds me of one of my favorite quotes in these chapters. Comes later. Let's see. Oh, yeah. And I love how he gets the first word. He's like, fucking just jumps in, takes over. He tells her to surrender. She's like, Gregor, what the fuck? He says, don't worry about it. He's just off his meds. So he starts walking towards Miles with his hands up until he's right in front of the cannon's muzzle. And that's when Miles drops the blast doors.
Yeah, it's really funny because Miles is so stunned. So he's just like standing there like, ooh. And it's like, you have to actually lock the doors. But do you think Gregor knew then that these doors were there? Maybe you could see it in the ship. So you could see like, okay, if I'm walking further, then they will be able to lock these doors between us.
Have you read the Mistborn series?
Yeah.
Okay, so the characters in that often have worked together for so long that they have like names for special moves and like plans or whatever. I think Miles and Gregor are so simpatico that like one trusts the other to get the job done. Also, in this case, Gregor would have intimate knowledge of starships because he's trained for the military. And I think that, you know, he knows the capabilities and he looks around, he sees the corridor and he's like, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, those are the same blast doors that rose slowly.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
To reveal the cannon.
Yeah, that makes sense. So he's like, okay, if I get past those, yeah. It's fun. He's very theatrical. He and Miles probably had a like great theater when they were kids, you know?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, we have all those stories of Miles like ordering around Elena and I guess Gregor or Ivan.
Yeah.
So they probably played from time to time. We definitely know that they play chess or Stratego or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Stratagema.
Yeah.
So Miles is like, none of our weapons were charged. And Gregor's like, all right. And they go off to the tack room. Miles is talking about how he was worried that Cavillo had fogged Gregor's mind. He didn't know how fast Gregor would see through her.
Oh, at once, shrugged Gregor. She had the same hungry smile Vordrosa used to get. And a dozen lesser cannibals since. I can smell a power-hungry flatterer 1,000 meters now. At 1,000 meters. Sorry.
Yeah.
Jumping ahead in the words. But it's like, I just want to say, it's like Vordrozda. That's hard to say.
Vordrozda.
There's a D there.
Yeah, it makes me wonder if there are any names similar to that in our world, or if this is just a made-up space name.
Yeah, some Drozda name.
Yeah.
I really like, in a later book, there's someone called Warburg. That's like really funny name to me, yeah.
Yeah, we learn more about Vordrozda in The Warrior's Apprentice, but we get the idea from context here. Gregor's got a lot of bottom feeders around him.
Yeah.
Miles is like, you saved yourself. And Gregor says, yeah, I just needed to have no personal honor. He says, maybe there's some way to give her a fair chance. Miles blinked. I'd be very careful about giving Cavillo any kind of chance at all if I were you, even with tongs. Does she deserve it? Do you realize what's going on? How many she's betrayed? In part, and yet what? Gregor's tone was so low as to be nearly inaudible. I wish she had been real. I relate to this so hard. I've fallen for many of unavailable women. Like, it's, oh man, it's such a relatable feeling.
Yeah, and I could see if he really has to trick her, that it could be like some part of him that feels like living this fantasy is like enjoyable in a sense.
Mm-hmm. So Miles briefs him on the situation. He says you have to choose fight or flight. Gregor wants to fight. He offers him the field command. But then he says you could instead do the diplomacy, which would help us minimize casualties.
Yeah, should I read this?
Yeah, go for it.
So this first part is Gregor then. I could be a soldier, some lowly lieutenant with only a handful of men to care for. There's no moral difference between 1 and 10,000, I assure you. You just have as truly damned however many you get killed. I want to be in on the fight, probably the only chance I'll have in my life for a real risk. What? The risk you run every day from lunatic assassins isn't enough thrill for you? You want more? I like the last part also, like that comes after that when he says oh, maybe that's later. Sorry, maybe I'm jumping ahead. But isn't that the part where he says like, if you really think that you're doing the best thing, like to be a lieutenant, then I will support you.
Oh yeah, he's like, you could be a lowly lieutenant, like it's really kind of twisting the knife a bit. Classic Miles maneuver.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to handle Gregor in this book. To be like, do you really want this? And then he has to be like second guess himself. But if Miles would be against him, then maybe he would be like, I will do it. Fuck you.
Yeah, I found it. If, in your judgment, the best and most vital service you can give everyone else risking their lives here is as a minor field officer, I will, of course, support you to the best of my ability, said Miles bleakly.
I like your tone that you gave him. It was very subordinate. Very sincere.
Let's see. So Miles says, I'll support you either way. Gregor is like, thanks a lot. And then he asks what's up with Vervain and Randall's Rangers. Miles says, you realize, Gregor, you did this? Sabotaged the Cetagandan invasion single-handedly? Oh, breathed Gregor. It took both hands. Bow chicka bow wow.
Yeah, totally.
It's so funny. Early on, Miles was like, hey, Ungari said this doesn't happen, but maybe I could have some sexy spy shenanigans. And Gregor went and did it.
Yeah. I really like this overall in this book, that it's like there is a whole separate story with Gregor, and you just get like this kind of highlights, like that it was like super emotional for him and super hot. It was like you don't really get a lot of actual details, but it becomes kind of fun. It's like I always like this in books when they have plots happening outside of the pages, because it feels like a deeper story, you know, because everyone do have their own stories.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a good example. Dresden Files, probably, but I can't think of a good example. Maybe whatever his partner's doing out there. Karen Murphy. Let's see here. So they interrogate Cavillo with her still locked in her space armor. And Gregor's like, did you think I was some kind of chump? Like I didn't know what the hell I was doing? And so Miles explains to her how she failed. Do you want to read this one?
Yeah. You were out of your league from the beginning, Cavillo, said Miles, walking slowly around her as if inspecting his prize. By the way, that's really weird. Okay. That was just my comment. Her head turned to follow him.
You mean just a weird way of saying it, or a weird
no,
thing for Miles to do?
He's like walking slowly around her, like he's just like being some kind of master villain, you know?
Yes. He's turned the tables.
You were out of your league from the beginning, Cavillo. And it's like, do. Okay. And the way they say it, like walking slowly around her as if inspecting his prize, you know, that's weird. Her head turned to follow him, then had to swivel to pick up his orbit on the other side. You should have stuck to your original contract, or your second plan, or your third. You should, in fact, have stuck to something. Anything. Your total self-interest didn't make you strong. It made you a rag in the wind. Anybody's to pick up.
Now, for somebody that isn't a malignant narcissist, that would be just such a painful twist of the knife, you know, like what an insight. But these kind of people, just those words bounce right off their skin, you know. It really is true.
More sad to lose than to be judged by anything.
Oh, but man, he read her filthy. They give her a choice. She can agree to help them prevent further bloodshed, or run off and be hunted by the Cetagandans forever. She decides to help, but then she says this eerily prophetic shit that I feel like casts a shadow over the entire rest of the series. Cavillo looked as if she wanted to spit, but said, "Very well, I yield. You have your deal. Thank you. But you..." Her eyes were chips of blue ice, her voice low and venomous. "You will learn, little man. You're riding high today, but time will bring you down. I'd say just wait 20 years, but I doubt you're going to live that long. Time will teach you how much nothing your loyalties will buy you. The day they finally grind you up and spit you out, I'm just sorry I won't be there to watch, 'cause you're gonna be hamburger. I love sour grapes. Like, it's almost like how like a Torch song is the most like embarrassing, emotional kind of song. It's like a villain whining at the end, you know. It's like it's that Scooby-Doo moment of like, I would have done it too if you weren't for you meddling kids.
Yeah. It's a nice symmetry because first Miles judges her and she's like, I will judge you back. And the idea that they are like a little bit similar. And that's what Gregor says later, right? That they have a lot in common.
Yes.
Or after this.
Yeah, it's right after this. He's like, yeah, I see some parallels there. Ungari and Overholt get let in, and Ungari immediately starts yelling at Miles.
Miles motioned the dark-faced captain's eye toward Gregor. Those are such widely shared sentiments, Captain Ungari, that I'm afraid you might have to stand in line and wait your turn, Gregor remarked, smiling slightly.
Oh my God. Imagine like the president walking in and just being like, hey man, what's up? You should relax.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what the equivalent is in your society, but the prime minister or...
Yeah, but he's such a douche, so I don't think I would care.
Yeah, it'd have to be someone you respect.
Yeah, that's true. But if you were working for them, maybe you would feel some kind of professional respect. But yeah, I don't know who it would be if someone was like, no, I don't think there's anyone. In this society, they're so hierarchical. So there's like, oh, this person is basically a god. But
yeah, on par for sure.
Do you think, I don't remember if we know, like, does Ungari know that Gregor ran away, or does he think he was kidnapped?
I don't remember. Oh, Miles filled him in. You know, back when they dosed him and took off.
Oh yeah, I suppose. But
Miles
did he
briefed
know?
Him already.
Yeah, but maybe he still didn't know if he was there voluntarily or not. I'm not totally clear on that.
He wouldn't know about the suicide attempt.
Yeah, but do you know, like, if he ran away from Komar, or maybe he thought that he was taken somehow?
Yeah.
Anyways,
yeah,
I don't know if
possible.
it's important. I'm just feeling like, if you knew, would that like undermine his authority? So I'm assuming they didn't tell anyone except the people that were really there at Komar. So they're just like, the Emperor is here, you know, like, find him.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Next up, Gregor says he's assigning them to his own person. Miles thinks about how space combat works, how you basically defer to the tactical computer unless something changes strategically. After a jump, you're supposed to clear the area so the next ship doesn't hit yours.
It feels like some kind of subway or something, like stand to the side.
That's similar to Babylon 5, I think. I don't know if anybody ever sits in the jump way, but I think that's part of it. And then also maybe Cowboy Bebop. I think they go one at a time through the wormholes there.
Do you think you could leave something in the exit? Like if you build like a structure or something, then no one could jump in because they would just hit the wall.
I would hope the wormhole jump is ringed by, I mean, it'd have to be a sphere though. I don't know how feasible this would be, but there to be like automatic lasers and tractor beams to keep the area clear. Because even the smallest amount of debris could theoretically cause a decompression or go right through the engine.
Yeah, if you leave some kind of tiny space mine, is it gonna like blow up? but they have the shield stuff or the equivalent. But I was thinking also, I mean, you could leave some kind of imploder lance like laying around in this
oh shit,
around there.
yeah, just like a little fusion reactor with an imploder lance just sitting there.
Yeah.
With drone. There
Like a
really
mine.
isn't as much drone stuff in these. I think I mean, they're ubiquitous now, both in our world and also like Murderbot or what have you.
Yeah, a lot of sci-fi. But I was gonna say, maybe I could imagine that the wormhole has some kind of gravity. So if you leave something out there, maybe it's like hard to keep it in the same place. Maybe it would fall into the wormhole, or it would like be pushed
and then
out.
it'd be the other guy's problem on the other side.
Just disappears. Yeah.
I think they have to have like vacuuming shuttles or something. Just kind of making sure that area is clear.
Probably. I mean, we have a lot of problems just in our orbit, that it's like a lot of junk floating around. So it would be a lot of it after a while, I feel like, in the space.
I almost think there should be tugboats that go just ahead of you with big shields that push everything away. Just in case this situation. Because if you're like a giant warship and you roll in and just run into a mine, like you're done for.
Yeah.
Now I want to write some Vorkosigan fanfic where he just leaves a bunch of mines in the jump point and they appear inside a starship. Oh, Cetagandans hit Vervain once and are now moving to block the other jump point. So he thinks about various ways to seize a jump point. He goes through the first three and then he goes, the fourth approved approach for the problem of frontally attacking a guarded wormhole was to shoot the officer who suggested it. Miles trusted the Cetagandans would work around to that one too by the time he was done. I like the cockiness of thinking all the way ahead to like the Cetagandans losing. He doesn't say it out loud though. You can't jinx it, right? You can think it, but you shouldn't say it.
Yeah.
He hopes that the threat of reinforcements back in the hub will discourage the Cetagandans. But Tongue is like, nah, it's too late for them to cut and run. It's like throwing good money after bad. And it made me think of the Bay of Pigs, where like they planned for a long time. Nixon and his evildoers planned to send these right-wing Cubans back to Cuba and like start a revolution, sort of try to do what Castro did, but in a cheesy right-wing way. But one of the reasons why it failed was that Kennedy withdrew the air support like at the last minute. So the guys knew it wasn't going to work and they did it anyway. So they basically just sacrificed a whole bunch of people to like, I don't know what, prove a political point. But it caused a lot of angst and may have led to his assassination. We don't know exactly what was going on in Oswald's head, but certainly that was the right wing were always going on about the Bay of Pigs.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wonder. It's like the, what is that called? The loss aversion bias, where it's like you kind of don't want to lose something, so then you try to fix it, even though you should just be like, it's lost.
Yeah. Also the sunk cost fallacy.
Oh yeah, that's what the one. Sorry, that's what the one I was thinking about. Like the way that you put already some cost into it, and then you feel like, no, I cannot lose this. You know.
I mean, that kept us in Vietnam for 10 years, or more than that even. And then Russia and Afghanistan, and I guess now us everywhere. Technically, we left Iraq and Afghanistan, but it took a long time.
Yeah. I was also thinking about this. Maybe we shouldn't go too much into that, but like it's interesting to imagine the geopolitical discussions about this because, of course, like the Citaganans and the Barriarans are not at peace. You know, they have all these different conflicts. But I wonder, like, what other countries would say. You know, they could still be, even though they are not, they don't have like some kind of space UN or anything like, but they should probably still be. There are still consequences, I assume, where Siraganda is trying to invade this planet. That maybe other planet would be like, oh, we have to make stronger alliances against these, and you know, the more aggressive they are, the more other planets would react. So I haven't really thought about that. But it would be interesting to have known more about what kind of diplomatic discussions goes on and who are more interested in aligning with who and such.
Yeah, I wonder if, well, I guess the next book is Sitaganda, right? And so there is some discussion of like the aftermath of this event or this time period.
Yeah, at least they talk a little bit about what it's like for people living on the main Sitaganda planet. And it seems like in general, they kind of have pretty good standard of living. So maybe that's part of what people feel is appealing.
Yeah, it's interesting how these two empires, it's the way they interact is similar to the US and the Soviet Union, but like they're both more like America than the Soviet Union.
Mm.
But I think when this series started, the Soviet Union still existed.
Yeah, it was. Bujold has said that she was lucky that she didn't talk about the Soviet Union. Like, she was calling them Russians and not like Soviets or something. Because
Yes.
she could have. And then it would not have been as... it would not have aged as well.
Totally.
But in that one, it's like the Batons. In the first part, you know, it's more like the Batons are the Americans and the Baroyarans are the Russians.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I don't know what the Gandans are. I feel like people keep saying that they are space elves. So they are just a totally other nation.
It's wild.
It's if we...
I'm thinking of, it's almost like harkening back to previous colonial times, like Britain versus, I don't know what, China or Japan or France or America, sort of that 50 to 100 year period where like everybody was trying to gobble up the world.
Yeah. Who would be Britain then? Is it Siriganda or are the British?
Shit, I don't know. They did a lot of bad stuff in India. Sure,
we'll
why
have
not?
we'll have to look to see like what the different parallels are to decide.
Yeah, I don't think the genetic manipulation applies to any current societies, but
no, they were not as good at it, you know. So it's like,
oh well, Germany tried eugenics, right?
Yeah, it could be Germany, maybe.
Pan out.
Sweden was very into eugenics.
Ugh, junk science.
Yeah. My grandmother had this. Sorry, I'm going off topic.
Please.
But she had a history book that was like about different races, and it was like Italians are very happy, and like these guys are like this. I don't remember any other. But I kind of wanted to keep it because it was like so weird for me. But apparently my father threw it away when she died, so I didn't get to keep it.
Yeah, it's funny how the really racist stuff. We have this tension between wanting to like save it for future generations to like learn from its mistakes, like Mein Kampf or something. But most of it's garbage, you know? Like, do we really want to keep little black Sambo around? Like, that was something my mom had. You know, does it have any historical, cultural value? Should it be in a museum or should they all be burnt? You know, like that kind of stuff. I mean, there's even films about it that got Oscars. Like, what's the one about the KKK? Is it Howard Hughes or Griffiths? The South Will Rise Again. What's that movie called?
Haven't seen it.
KKK origin movie. Birth of a Nation.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's some things that have like an outsized cultural impact, even though they're gross and their ideas are dangerous. So Miles explains their options tactically, and I like the description of how the imploder lance can encourage some brave ship captains to get real up close and take out their enemies. And then Oser and his allies break out of the brig. He steals a shuttle. It pops out into the fire zone. Miles wonders who might be helping them. And then he runs for the Peregrine, his own ship. I like how Tongue takes these 15-minute breaks, snoring on the bridge. Miles loses a ship, another one loses weapons, and then an unexpected call comes in. It's reinforcements. The Prince Serg, followed by a bunch of other forces. We learn that its imploder lance range is longer than the Cedagandan ships, and so it's just carving them up. The rest of the forces are coming right behind, and Tongue expresses joy. For a moment, Miles thought Tongue was about to faint. Tongue inhaled alarmingly and bellowed with delight. Errol Vorkosigan! Here? Hot damn! And in an only slightly more private whisper, how'd they lure him out of retirement? Maybe I'll get to meet him. I just love Tongue's joy at seeing Vorkosigan.
Yeah, me too. But I think it's funny because thinking about the Unspoiled podcast, and Natasha was so disappointed that you don't actually get to see him meet.
Yes. Oh my God, Natasha on Spoil Me. She was so jazzed, just fully pumped to finally see Tongue fangirl over, or fanboy over Vorkosigan. The battle wraps up in short order, and we move on to chapter 17.
Yeah.
Turns out Metsov and Cavillo also escaped the brig.
Had Metsov and Cavillo been aboard that fleeing shuttle too? Fine irony for Cavillo to die at the hands of the Cedagandans after all. Though, admittedly, it would have been equally ironic had she died at the hands of the Revani, Randos Rangers, the Aslanders, the Barayarans, or anyone else she double-crossed in her brief cometary career in the Hagen Hub. Oh, is it Hagen Hub? Yeah. Her end was neat and convenient, if true. But he didn't like to think that her last savage remarks to him had now acquired the prophetic weight of a dying curse.
Yes. Oh, man. Her last savage remarks. So he visits sickbay. He's starting to get near tears as he schmoozes with the wounded. So he goes off to his cabin to be alone. And who's there but Metsov and Cavillo? Metsov has a nerve disruptor. But like a dumbass, he drops his weapon and starts choking Miles. His fatal mistake.
Yeah, too much emotional.
Yeah, it's that cockiness. He knows that Miles can... Also, he's a bully, right? So he knows that he can totally break Miles's neck with his bare hands. And he's like, he's just got to do it.
Yeah, the weapon is too indirect. But I also think it's funny because you talked about in the start about how or previously you talked about how this is like the book where Miles almost dies the most. And this is like a
Yes.
final, just like near death. After everything is like, oh, I made it, like everything is fine. And it's like, no. And it was so long now since he was almost killed. He's not been killed for a while, or attempted. So you almost have a false sense of security.
Nice symmetry with Metzoff and nerve disruptors.
Oh yeah,
Comes
that's
back
true.
again.
Mm.
He just got to get his hands dirty.
Yeah.
And we find out he got his hands dirty in another way as well. Because we learn that he assaulted Cavillo through her quoting him, saying this awful stuff to her. She picks up the gun and blows his head off. Miles wonders what she plans to do with him. And she says she wants him to do what he said and help her escape the hub. Tung gets invited to meet Count Vorkosigan. The XO of the Serg shows up and he explains how Naismith should speak with the great man. And of course, Miles is riding that line. Miles watched, delighted, as the earnest officer sought a polite way of saying, "Call him sir, don't wipe your nose on your sleeve, and none of your damned bait and egalitarian backchat either. You may find him rather formidable," Yegorov concluded. "A real stuffed shirt, eh?" The lieutenant frowned. "He is a great man." "Ah, I bet if we pour enough wine into him at lunch, he'll loosen up and tell dirty stories with the best of them."
Yeah.
Clearly using his personal knowledge, and also just, he can't resist an attempt to like needle his superior officers.
That's true. Even if they don't know that they are the superior.
Yeah, even if they don't know it's him. So Elena's like, "Admiral, behave yourself." Miles gets to the Serg. He's marveling at its, beautiful business. It's still in construction, apparently. And he's like, "If only I'd lasted 6 months at Kuril Island, I could be serving on this thing."
Yeah. I also think it's fun that it's like the Prince Serg, because of the whole start of the story where Gregor learned about his father. So it's like the father is kind of hunting a little bit this story with the name and such.
Wow, I hadn't even considered that. Like, he is even given command of the Serg.
Oh yeah, that's true. So maybe it's
and
like
we find
symbolic.
out that the reason he committed suicide is because he found out how fucked up his dad was.
Yeah. So maybe that's like, if he has command of the Serg for a while, it's almost like, symbolic that he conquered like his ghost of his father.
Ooh, yeah. Wow. Just another way, like I said in our interview with Lois, that it could be called Gregor's honor. Like he's been wrestling with it this whole time, and he's like, "You know what? Miles is right. I am a good leader, and I could do this." Very cool.
Yeah.
So Errol rushes forward and hugs Miles. He addresses Elena, drops some Cordelian wisdom on him.
Elena, with an effort, Count Vorkosigan broke away from Miles to take both Elena's hands in a firm, brief grip. "You are well." "Yes, sir." "That pleases me, more than I can say. Cordelia sends her love and her best hopes. If I saw you, I was to remind you, I must get the phrase exact. It was one of her bait cracks. Home is where, when you have to go there, they have to take you in."
Yeah.
And apparently it's like a Robert Frost quote, right?
Oh.
I think I read it somewhere, or maybe another podcast mentioned it.
That's kind of silly that Errol would call it a bait and crack and not a quote from Robert Frost.
Yeah. Well, I think that could be, that could be very, I could see that happening where like some things are just used
Yeah,
for
I mean,
so long
they
that
were
he
cut
was like
off forever.
forget.
Like it's hundreds or something years in the future. So yeah.
Yeah. They only brought like military history. And there's like, who is this?
Totally. And also like non-English speaking history and poetry and stuff.
Mm.
Greeks, Russians, whatnot. So Miles notices that his dad looks super stressed, and he figures the Gregor's disappearance must have caused him a ton of worry. Apparently, the Cedagandan commanders will all be secretly executed when they get home. Errol explains how they handled Gregor's disappearance. They had a double just relax at Vorkosigan-Sorlo, and then they sent him out to a camp in the woods.
Yeah.
The way they got through pole space was by faking a diplomatic visit, or I guess by actually having one.
Mm.
And then because of the fight broke out, they were like, sorry, we got to go. And then Pole sent ships with them. Like it was a whole deal. He explains how letting Gregor stay in the tack room helped sell him as like the savior of Vervain. Like he was putting himself at risk to save this planet kind of thing.
Yeah.
And apparently it was Gregor's idea.
Yeah. I was gonna say, actually, it made me think about something broader that we didn't really talk about before, but like when Gregor doesn't know that his father was a terrible person, that's really like Errol's fault. You know, do you think that he felt bad, like if he knew? Or I guess he wouldn't know, but if somehow he was like, oh, maybe this was my fault that he left, you know?
I mean, maybe when Gregor turned 18 or even 25, like they say that the age of majority or at some point in here, or the age he had to like hand over the reins to Gregor.
Mm.
But I can see why he wouldn't, right? Like, because if you tell him that, you also have to tell him we got 50,000 people killed so we could kill your dad. Like,
I don't know that you have to tell that. You could say like, oh, he was like a terrible person. He died in the war, you know. It doesn't have to be the.
There's
But
always
yeah,
another secret.
it could, I mean, sure, it could have been a little bit awkward if Gregor was like, oh, you know, so you were just gonna give him the power, you know, what didn't have any backup. It's like, yes, we didn't have like any plans. But I don't know. I just feel like it's, you know, I was discussing this earlier a little bit on Reddit that I was talking like, and I wish actually I would have thought about this before because I would like to ask Lois, but you know, how common is this knowledge that Serg was a terrible person? Because on Barrier it's like buried, but still a lot of people do know. It's just not said because they have this kind of idea of keeping up appearances. But I wonder in the wider galaxy, you know, if you are at like Vervain in their Wikipedia, does it say like, oh, he was a terrible sadist, you know, or is it just like not known?
Well, we know there were propaganda films, and we
Yeah,
know
in
that.
Barrier. Or do you mean like the Baton one?
No, like the Batons and other
Yeah.
places, presumably.
Mm.
We know there were, was it 19 children? And presumably, I don't know how often the women got pregnant, so maybe there were 50 victims or 100.
Mm.
And all those people, if they survived, would have told, you know.
Yeah, but they knew that's like more the Baryarans in general. So I guess it's interesting, like how much. I don't know. It's just interesting that, for example, some Komaran told Gregor about this, and I wonder,
Yeah.
is it like all Komarans know this, or is it just like this one Komaran knew this? And that really affects like how I feel about Errol keeping it a secret because it really is something that you should know as the ruler, you know.
I mean, if you think about it, it suggests that Errol and even Gregor have limited internet access on Barrayar, or somehow like gaslit all of Barrayar into thinking all those other planets made this up, right? Like it's not real.
I mean,
oh my God, that's disturbing.
Yeah, I think that the way it's described is like the way this universe is set up, which kind of makes it age well, is that you have this very limited way to send information between planets. So you have like, you can send a little bit, like, you know, the equivalent of like a little bit of data. I don't know how much it would be, but like you would have to send it physically through on the ship. So
right. And an insular society might not have a big market for stuff from other planets.
Yeah. And I feel like probably Barrier is limiting. Maybe they're like, oh, you cannot send any information except the approved one. You know, so
That's
they
what
have
I'm
like
thinking.
a censorship.
I'm thinking like to protect this knowledge from Gregor, Errol instituted like draconian policies.
All of it is just to protect Gregor.
Or like Fox News. It like, I think China has a news service that just runs down anything from non-communist countries or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's still, I guess like what I'm thinking is like how, if other people knew it, then how widespread it was. That really does matter for if Gregor was told. But I guess I could see it being like more of a kind of a general, I don't know, that people are not that interested in Barrier. Specific people, like they were like, oh, these Barriers are terrible, and that's like the main interest.
Well, yeah, and they have a bad reputation even before that fight.
So that could help to prevent this rumor from spreading, because it would be like, oh, like all of these different people, you know, and the guy was just a crown prince. He wasn't even a ruler. So, and maybe they are just like, what is even a crown prince? We don't know how this works, you know.
I mean, in our society, in the US, this is very relatable. Like all our founding fathers, most of them were slave owners, like just pretty shitty. Like George Washington, it turns out, was the richest man in America at the time. Like because of they had 300 slaves or whatever. Like there's so much fake history about our leaders, about like the genocide of the Native Americans, like so many things that a large swath of our society just does not want to hear about.
Yeah, but I feel like this is only 25 years ago, so that's like still very recent. It's like if you were the president and you were not told about like some kind of insight about 9/11.
Ooh, yeah.
And it would just be like, and then you went to like some other country, they were like, oh, like, of course you know like this about 9/11. You're like, oh, wait, what?
Yeah, the FBI wanted to open Zacharias Moussaoui's laptop and we told them no, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway.
Or the Kennedy assassination, like half those documents are still sequestered. Trump promised that he would have them all released, still redacted.
No.
So
do you think
bizarre.
that someone burned them maybe? So now it's like, oh, we don't actually have them.
There's just a massive pile of like thousands of documents just taking up space in a warehouse somewhere.
But what would people do if they were released? Then they would have all the info. That's not fun.
Yeah. So Errol says he had to let Gregor be the commander in chief, and Miles is surprised to learn that Gregor faced him down. He says, "Oh, to have been a fly on the wall of that chamber."
Yeah.
Errol explains that Ungari is not happy about Miles. Then he explains what Metsov's early crime was, where he killed a prisoner And then a guard wouldn't play ball with the cover-up, and so he killed him as well, and then blamed it on the prisoner. And then Errol says, beware of seeking justice. You might get it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a common trope in, I guess, a lot of media, like the idea that if you keep digging, you know, like in Chinatown, everyone's corrupt, or in Altered Carbon, like basically everyone's corrupt. Like there's no one you can go to like get reciprocity, and you might find out that your family's implicated. Like it's a whole deal.
Mm.
Miles asks how the Dendari will be paid. Errol says not to worry. Miles asks what they'll do with the fleet, and it's still to be determined. Errol says Miles will have to keep playing Naismith around Tongue so the relationship doesn't come out.
I should warn you, Admiral Naismith is not very differential. Elena and Count Verkosigan looked at each other, and both broke out into laughter. Miles waited, wrapped in what dignity he could muster, till they subsided. Finally.
I love this.
Mm.
This is classic family banter. Just cutting each other up.
Yeah.
Lightly poking. This is one of my favorite moments in the whole book, I think. So Miles goes to the medal ceremony, or I guess, is it a medal ceremony? It's just a meeting, I think. And Cavillo's there. She's got her poison perfume on. But wait, Miles has his nose filters.
Do you think that would work? Because you could still get the smell into your eyes, I feel like. I don't have any allergies like that, so I don't know.
Yeah, I think his eyes should have got runny at least. And his skin maybe get itchy.
Yeah.
That's one of those sci-fi plot holes where you're just like, it's more fun this way.
Yeah. Maybe the nose filters are like future nose filters. So they
they take care of all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Miles starts rubbing it in. He says the Dendari fleet gets paid 3 times for the same job. And she's like, you better pray we don't meet again. And Miles thinks about having to be Vorkosigan again. If there was any difference between himself and Cavillo, it must be in what they chose to serve and how they chose to serve it. Not all paths, but one path.
Yeah.
Yeah, she like constantly changes her game, whereas he has to stay focused, like protect Gregor, make life better for so-called mutant babies, all his plans or whatever.
Yeah. And also, I think just that you cannot just justify anything, that he has to also think about what is like honorable to do, or at least like, what is the purpose.
Yeah.
Because the way that she said before was like, you should pick so that all paths lead to victory or all paths lead to success. And he feels like, okay, I'm not going to be able to actually do all the paths. I have to actually try to pick whatever is that what would you say, like the path that actually is right.
Right. It's the most moral. It saves the most lives.
Yeah.
He protects his honor, stuff like that. So we're back on Barriar, and the Miles and Gregor are having lunch, and Miles is loving the food. And I just like this little moment. Miles sipped scalding coffee and plotted an assault on a second pastry, which cowered across the table linen under a thick camouflage of cream. Or would that overmatch his forces?
Yeah.
Good times.
Yeah. I was gonna say comment on the Gregor says that he really likes Barrier. It's like beautiful. And
Oh,
that
yes.
underscores my point. It's terrible in space and it's really boring because you're always indoor.
Yeah. And Gregor is trying to focus on the positives of, his life. He's not going to get to spend a lot of time on ships.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I wonder, he has been kind of manipulative in this book. He's been telling people a little bit what they want to hear at times. So I wonder, do you think that he's like saying this to Miles so that Miles will be more comfortable? Maybe he doesn't at all care about. Maybe it's just like lying to him.
More comfortable about the thought of leaving Gregor, and he won't try to commit suicide again?
Yeah, or I mean, maybe he does. Maybe it's not a total lie. I'm sure he does like the look of Barrier, but could he say this because he feels like this is something that Miles would want to hear?
I like that. I mean, we know Gregor is very calculating, so he's always got 2 or 3 things going on at once. I really like this quote. Would you read this? I'm still thinking about it.
Yeah. Gregor says, I'm still thinking about it. It seemed almost unreal till I visited sickbay afterwards, and I realized such and such a point of light meant this man's arm lost, that man's lungs frozen. Gotta watch out for those little lights. They tell such soothing lies, Miles agreed. If you let them.
Yeah. I heard something just the other day. I think it was... No, it wasn't the boys. Whatever it was something about how being in charge... Oh, maybe it... Well, anyway, being in charge of something big organization means, or a country means, accepting that people are going to die. That, like, whatever choice you make is going to be bad for some people. Or hated by some group, or, essentially. Like Abraham Lincoln's quote, you can please some people all of the time, all the people some of the time, or some can't get fooled again.
Yeah, not all the people all of the time, I suppose.
Right, yes, that one.
I didn't know those, Lincoln. I think I've only heard it garbled in like other stuff. But
not spot on like I just did.
Yes, this was totally exactly like you said it. But I was thinking actually about the Expanse in the show. I don't think it's in the books, the same quote, but it's kind of funny because they have like this one like leader who is like doing wanting to do some kind of strike, and then like one of his advisors is like, I don't remember what's leading up to it, but he's saying something like, oh, this is like a philosophical thing, like say like saving lives, blah blah blah. And she's like, oh, there is an answer, and he's saying, okay, so you're saying there's actually an answer, like how many people a leader can sacrifice and still be a good man? And she's like, yes, as few as possible.
Oh, I love that. That sounds like something Drummer might have said.
No, it was Anna.
Oh, the preacher. Yeah. Yep.
But
totally.
in the book, she's not in this scene, so I don't think it's a book quote. I think it was for the show.
Yeah, it was surprising to me after reading the books, like how much good stuff they came up with just for the show. A lot of times a show will completely demolish a book series.
Yeah, I agree. It's so hard. For some reason, it's really hard for a showrunner to actually just do the story from the books. And I think it's just that people get too much ego. They try to just do their own thing, and they are not interested in actually trying to adapt it, even though you could adapt in a good way, I feel like. But this one is a really good adaptation. But I actually prefer the show because I watched the show first.
It's definitely less bleak. A lot more conflict. The characters are a bit more distinct. Basically what you want from a TV adaptation is
I think that they
extra
did
good stuff.
Yeah, they changed it a little bit. Like some of the characters are much more extroverted because they have to like verbalize more. They can't just be like, I'm thinking this in my head. Unless you wanted to do voiceover. It's just like Miller being like, whoa, 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 whoa.
That's Dune 1984. Like, you know, in that it was almost like necessary because those people keep almost everything in the thought bubble. Whereas with The Expanse, they can be like, well, people are a little more expressive and share their opinion more.
That's true.
So Gregor told Ilian he was drunk when he fell. So Ilian still doesn't know about his suicidal problem. Miles suggests that Gregor share his worries with his mom, Cordelia.
And tell her, why didn't you tell me about my dad? You know.
Oh, God, yes. Gregor expresses his fear of becoming like his dad. It turns out he found out about his crimes, and that precipitated his suicide attempt. And Miles says, don't worry, we're both related to those crazies. I'm sure you'll be fine. I'm afraid of power. Gregor's voice went low, contemplative. You aren't afraid of power. You're afraid of hurting people. If you wield that power, Miles deduced suddenly. Huh. Close guess. Not dead on. I'm afraid I might enjoy it. The hurting. Like him. Prince Serg, he meant. His father. Rubbish, said Miles. I watched my grandfather try and get you to enjoy hunting for years. You got good, I suppose, because you thought it was your Vorish duty. But you damn near threw up every time you half missed, and we had to chase down some wounded beastie. You may harbor some other perversion, but not sadism.
Now I want to know what his other perversions are.
I'll never tell.
Maybe Camilla knows.
Oh, boots and a cravat. What else? I'm trying to think of silly ones because obviously there's plenty of just downright filthy ones. Gregor says he could have stopped the bloodshed if he'd killed her.
If I strangled her while she slept, which I had a chance to do, none of those horrors would have come to pass. If none of those horrors had come to pass, she wouldn't have deserved to be strangled. Some kind of time travel paradox, I'm afraid. The arrow of justice flies one way only. You can regret not strangling her first, though I suppose you can regret not strangling her after. Oh, sorry, you can't regret, I mean.
Yeah. I suppose you can regret not strangling her after. So I guess not letting her take part in the medal ceremony, dumping her out an airlock somewhere.
Yeah, because Miles was against this. He thought probably she should be executed.
Yeah. Now, I guess it was dicey. Like Cavillo, when she shot that captain, she was like, he was a traitor. I was justified. So like that was kind of an edge case. So yeah, they really did need to wait till they had proof that she killed that one guy or, yeah.
I mean, it depends. She's not their citizen. They could like kill her without any right to do so. Just like
I think he's speaking morally here, not legally. Yeah, obviously they're out in
the
international
emperor.
waters.
There's no moral for the emperor. It's only practical stuff.
Sure. So they start having a good time. Miles tells him he's good at diplomacy. Gregor says Miles will be fine, and he may be getting a promotion soon. Turns out the Kirill Island job is still open. And then Miles sees an earth tree, and he muses. The earth maple still stood, down the street and around the corner. its tender leaves backlit to a delicate green glow by the afternoon sun. Barriara native vegetation ran to dull reds and browns mostly. Would he ever visit Earth? Maybe. Of course, we know he will in memory?
Brothers in Arms.
Brothers in Arms, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fun parallel, because he was watching the Maple before when he was taken in after the Kuril Island problems.
Oh, like when he was stuck in IMSEC?
Yeah.
So Miles goes to see Ilian. There's an extra chair set up. And he's like, bro, you went super wild out there. And Miles is like, yeah, but I got the job done. Ilian focuses on his insubordination.
Miles tried to keep his face bland, though outblanding Ilian was a major effort. As I recall, said Ilian, and Ilian's memory was, what do you call it, eidetic?
Eidetic.
Eidetic. Thanks to an Illyrian biochip. I gave those orders to Captain Angari. I gave you just one order. Can you remember what it was? This inquiry was in the same encouraging tone one might use on a 6-year-old just learning to tie his shoes. Trying to out-irony Ilian was as dangerous as trying to outbland him.
Can you remember what it was? Just Mr. Rogers vibes here. Miles explains that he didn't want to be insubordinate, but Lord Vorkosigan was who he needed to be in this case. So he couldn't. Gregor arrives and he explains that Miles will be their liaison to the Dendari mercenaries. Ilian explains his philosophy of leadership. Ilian's irony this time was tinged with underlying approval? Errol and I have labored 20 years to put ourselves out of work. We may live long enough to retire after all. He paused. That's called success in my business, boys. I wouldn't object. And under his breath, get this hellish chip taken out of my head at last. Don't go scouting Surfside retirement cottages just yet, said Gregor. Gregor promotes Miles to lieutenant. You get the last quote.
Yeah.
And this is the last part of the whole book. Right?
Yeah. Ilian favored him with a driven glower. Don't get carried away. About 10% of ensigns. Is it ensigns?
Ensigns.
Ensigns. Why is it not written like that?
Right? Fucking English. What are we doing here?
10% of ensigns are promoted after their first year of service. Your warish social circle will think it's all nepotism anyway. I know, said Miles bleakly. But he opened his collar and began switching tabs on the spot. Ilian softened slightly. Your father will know better, though. And Gregor. And myself. Miles looked up to catch his eye directly for almost the first time this interview. Thank you. You earned it. You won't get anything from me you don't earn. That includes the dressing downs. I'll look forward to them, sir.
Wow. Interesting to give Ilian the last ending. Like there's a few endings in these in these last two chapters. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I guess
true.
because he's his direct boss, it makes sense.
Yeah, but yeah, it's almost like 3 endings, right? Because you have the ending with Earl, and then you have his meeting with Gregor, which feels a little bit like an epilogue, and then you have this meeting with Ilian.
Yeah. I think I would have loved a final scene with Cordelia. I know she doesn't do a lot in this book, but I feel like she's a constant presence in his mind.
That's
She
true.
comes back a lot, so it might have been fun to have her show up and just be all baiting all over the place.
Yeah, but I think that maybe in the way that Miles tells Gregor to talk to her, it's like for us that have read previous books, we feel it's like you're using the history to kind of wrap the Gregor story up, because it would be a little bit loose end to just leave him feeling like he does, and then you're like, oh,
Yeah.
Cordelia will take care of it.
Yes, and we do get a scene in this book when he's stuck at IMSEC where Cordelia comes and like gives him some straight talk.
Yeah. And I feel like that's necessary, because if someone were to read only this book, then they would they would have to know Cordelia. You couldn't just mention her in passing.
Right,
You would have to met her. Yeah.
Oh, I just realized it's interesting that he recommends that he talks to her because she is so ever present in Miles's mind as like the voice of wisdom. So surely other people would benefit from that.
Yeah.
That's cool. I always kind of wish that Cordelia would become president of Barriar. Oh, so I've got some final thoughts here. My fifth read through, this is still my favorite Vorkosigan book. I like the intrigue. I like the private musings on war and intelligence work. I like the growth of Gregor and learning more about his personality. My obsession with dangerous and unavailable women. I love Metzoff and Cavillo as villains, and the exploration of mental illness with kind of Miles' bipolar kind of thing, and Gregor in his depression.
Yeah, and the history, the overall, like almost like Targaryen vibe history.
Yeah. Well, and also whatever's going on with Cavillo and Metzoff, like that's an interesting psychological study as well.
That's true.
And I love the natural gifts of Miles, like his innate ability to lead and strategize long term.
Yeah. I feel like when you read them chronologically, this is like really the one where Miles comes into his own, because the previous one was a little bit just mishap.
It felt like he was improvising the entire time, and he was like, he was trying to prepare and be ahead of the game, but he was also fucking constantly under siege and reacting in the moment.
And it wasn't really the same kind of stakes, because it was only like, in the end, it was really only his personal stakes that were the cause of it. While here, there's like, he has a real mission and he's really part of Barriar.
Yeah, it was like about his lives and the lives of his loyal armsmen.
Yeah. Yeah. I also think I really like it. And I think we should do a wrap-up episode, and we could talk a little bit about like our thoughts about how it relates to the rest of the series. But I really do like Gregor as well. I think this is like my highlight when I'm rereading. I'm like, oh, there's so much Gregor in this one, because he's not in like a lot of the stories, and it's really fun to get more of him.
Yeah, I think in the next one he barely appears. Next one in the chronology.
Oh, if it's Sidaganda, he's not in that one, no, because they start by like going into orbit, like in the
they're like an ambassadorial mission.
It would be funny if there was like some kind of, I don't know, some kind of little greeting from Gregor or something that is sent along. I guess they do have the present and stuff, but there's no like note or anything.
Oh, that'd be fun. Like a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
And like, don't screw this up for me note.
Yeah, or like, they have video and such, so maybe they should always send. I'm thinking about something like in the Eurovision. Have you watched Eurovision?
Never.
That is rude. You should watch it. No, I'm just kidding. It's not. Right. It's kind of weird.
I've been meaning to. I got lots of online friends that love it.
No, but in that one, it's like they always have this kind of hosts coming in and giving, points and stuff. So there was like reading from this place. So I'm feeling like they should bring a video with Gregor on the ship, and then he could be like connected to their visit. He could be like readings from Barrier.
Yes.
And they could just like record it,
like that.
play it just a little.
Yeah, if it somehow could become a TV show, Gregor could be piping in from time to time.
Yeah.
Like Picard and his captain's logs.
Mm.
Was that a seamless segue or what? To Star Trek The Next Generation.
Yes.
Oh my God. It's like a month away. We're going to do the pilot. I'm so excited. I had some ideas for our wrap-up episode. I thought maybe we could pick some like award winners.
Yeah, totally.
And let me know if you have any other ideas for segments. And then if you have any other ideas for awards. I've got best main character. Oh, and listener, please chime in. Send us an email at greatandsecretknowledge@gmail.com or join our Discord. Link is in the show notes. And sound off. So I've got best main character, best side character, best villain, most surprising moment, wildest coincidence, which I feel like is only one answer, but doesn't matter. Best Miles moment, coolest tech, favorite scene, best outfit, funniest bit, sweetest moment, and favorite quote. So that'll give you a couple weeks to think about it. And we'll record. Plan is Sunday, March 30th. So if you can get your answers in or suggestions for other topics, do it before Sunday, March 30th. All right. Anything else before we jump on out of here?
I guess if we wanted to do any recommendations like that we have thought about.
Gotta do it. Lay it on me.
I think when I was thinking about Gregor and like his state of mind and such, I was thinking about the Goblin Emperor. I don't know if we talked about that one before, because it's like
I think
something
you mentioned it.
Yeah. Okay, I will mention it again then. But because I was thinking about this one in terms of like, it's like about this emperor who's young and coming into his own. But it's not exactly the same, because it's not that he wasn't like emperor from birth. But I still think it's like, I feel like it's a little bit similar in that it's like someone that is not experienced enough, to be able to feel comfortable and to like doubt a little bit about their abilities.
Cool. That sounds good. I'll have to check that out. Jin Yong has a new translation out for the next part of his Condor Heroes series. This is a Chinese author from the 60s who's been getting recent translations. It's my favorite fantasy series, Legend of the Condor Heroes. This one's called A Past Unearthed, and it's from a series called Return of the Condor Heroes. And it's once again, it's got a great young female character and young male character. It's kind of like YA from before there was YA, or I don't know. It's Chinese kung fu. It's all sorts of good stuff. Everything that I love. Genghis Khan was in the first series. I don't think I've run into any historical figures in this one, but who knows? Anyway, I loved that, binged through that. Friend of the show, or of my other podcast, Everything is Awesome, Daniel York Lowe is the narrator, and he's tremendous. I've got an anti-recommendation for Picard, Star Trek Picard, No Man's Land. It's the first audio drama about Star Trek with like actors from the shows, or at least from Picard. And it's not terrible. Like, it's not really an anti-recommendation. It's more like okay, I see where you're going. Like, it could get better from here. It's maybe a C or a B minus for me. But it has promise. I hope they do more of them. But you know, it's probably skippable. It's funny. I'm looking back over my stuff I've listened to recently, and I'm like, did I actually finish that? Oh man!
If you don't remember, maybe it's not a recommendation.
Yeah. Next time. It's always awkward when I get books and don't read them. Like, I think the Doctor Who convention threw my whole shit off. I got so many Doctor Who comics and Star Trek comics. Too much good stuff.
I just mean, like, if something really jumps out, then I feel like it's like easier to remember like how it ended or something. And if it's just like, oh, I don't remember how it ended, then it's like, then it was not good. Right.
Totally. Severance. If you haven't watched Severance, the season 2 is coming to a close. It's just a goddamn incredible show. So check that out. If you want to reach Sofia, as always, email us greatandsecretknowledge@gmail.com. You can find me all over the socials at El Jefe Tacoma. And if I finally have set up some social media for the show, look for the Great and Secret Knowledge all over the place. I've been telling myself I'll do it eventually, so maybe I'll do it today. Come, love, come to me.
A huge thanks to James Lark of jameslark.co.uk for providing our wonderful theme song. Thank you, James.